Hey YouTube, Carrotwig here, bringing you all an update to my Predaplant Yugioh deck profile for September 2023. With the release of the 2023 Megatins, I wanted to update the character Yuri from Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5's main deck that focuses on being able to fusion summon out a bunch of the different Predaplant and Starving Venom monsters that we have in the set. And also with the release of the 2023 Megatins, we saw reprints for a good amount of the newer Predaplant cards and also the Starving Venom Predapower Dragon as well. So those of you that might have missed the Dimension Force booster set can pick up a couple of these tins and maybe see a couple of these cards in that booster set as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the update for the deck. So we'll go ahead and start off with the main deck monsters. We're running 3 copies of Predaplant Bufolacula. For being a scale 0 pendulum monster, you can also pendulum summon out level 1 Predaplant monsters if you so wish to the field. Since our main go-to boss monster, Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, has to have 2 dark monsters on the field to use for its fusion summon. And during your main phase, you can fusion summon 1 dark fusion monster from your extract using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. So just having a card that can be used for a polymerization-like play is a definite 3-of for that setup. And if this card sent to the graveyard or added to your extra deck face-up, because it was used as fusion material, you can add 1 face-up Dark Pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand, except for Bufolacula. You can only use this effect of Bufolacula once per turn, but that recycle power comes in handy with our other Pendulum monster, being our Predaplant Triantis. While this card's in your Pendulum Zone, you can fusion summon 1 Dark Fusion monster. You can also use cards in your Pendulum Zone as monsters on the field as material for its fusion summon. So if you have your Triantis and your Bufolacula in the Pendulum scales, that's the 2 monsters needed for Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, sending both of them to the extra deck for the fusion play, activating your Bufolacula as well to then re-add the Triantis back into your hand for another Pendulum scale set. And if it's sent to the graveyard or add to the extra deck, because it was used for a fusion material, you can choose basically monsters on the field up to the number of monsters you control and place 1 Predator counter on each one. You can do any of those monsters that have level 2 or higher become level 1 as long as they have the Predator counter, which is a similarity to the majority of the cards that add Predator counters on 2 cards on the field. And being able just to go into the variety of our different Predaplant monsters helps with our plays in the deck as well, with those Predator counters then being used with the fusion monsters that we summon out. The last of the Pendulum monsters, the 1 copy of Predaplant Spider Orchid. During your main phase, if this card was activated this turn, you can target 1 other face-up card in the spell and trap card zone, destroy it. You can only use this effect of Spider Orchid once per turn, but it's another match if you wanted to run instead of a 3rd copy of Triantis. If you don't have Spider Orchid, you could just put in a 3rd copy of Triantis, and during the end phase of this card's normal or special summon, you can discard 1 plant monster to add 1 level 4 lower plant monster from your deck to your hand. Search power for some of our other, Predaplant plant monsters that we can use for our fusion plays later on. For the 3-ofs for our effect monsters in the deck, 3 copies of Predaplant Biblisp. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add 1 Predaplant monster from your deck to your hand, except for Biblisp. And if a monster with a Predator counter is on the field, you can special summon this card from your graveyard, but banish it when it leaves the field. You can only use each effect of Biblisp once per turn, but you have an easy special summon with some of the plays that your other Predaplant monsters are meant to do on the field for the Predator counter setup, and then also just having more of a search for any of the other Predaplant monsters when it's just sent to the graveyard. So even if it's just sent from your hand for a fusion play, you have that search power and then special summon power from your graveyard back onto the field. And then also for the other 3-ofs, 3 copies of Predaplant or for Scorpio. Another great setup card just for when this card's normal or special summon. You can send 1 monster from your hand to the graveyard to special summon 1 Predaplant monster from your deck, except for or for Scorpio. You can only use this effect of or for Scorpio once per turn. This is another way to set up the Biblisp in the graveyard. But the main one you'll want to summon off of the or for Scorpio is the Darling Tanya Cobra. We'll only run 1 of this card because you can only use the effect of it once per duel. If it's special summoned by the effect of a Predaplant monster, you can add 1 polymerization spell card or fusion spell card from your deck to your hand. You can only use this effect of Darling Tanya Cobra once per duel. You have that search power for a good variety of fusion cards we run in the deck, including the Predaprime Fusion quick play spell for our Predaplant fusion summons. And like I said, it's a once per duel card effect, so that's that's why we're only running the 1 copy in the deck. I also run 2 copies of Predaplant Yugioh. When this card, monsters with predator counters that use a fusion material are treated as dark, and during your main phase, you can fusion summon 1 dark fusion monster from your extra deck using this card on the field, and monsters from your hand field and or monsters with a predator counter your opponent controls as fusion material. So if you get your Predaplant monster on the field and then have the power of your Triantis to give your opponent the predator counter, since you used it for the fusion play with Volacula, you can then use the Clement's Undo to go for the fusion play with the other predator counter, using this card and that monster on the field to summon out another monster. Depending on what that monster is, you can also go for a wide variety of fusion plays, and if it's a fusion monster, all the better, because then you can use it to go into cards like your Predapower Fusion Dragon also. And then for some of the other 2-ofs that we run in the deck, 2 copies of Predaplant Spinodia. If this card is no more special summon, you can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls, place 1 predator counter on it, and if it is level 2 or higher, it becomes level 1, just like all the other predator counter setups. After damage calc, if this card battled a monster with equal or lower level, you can special summon 1 Predaplant monster from your deck, except for Spinodia. It's just more of a setup for the predator counters, and then the 1800 attack can get over some potential cards on the field. If you didn't want to run any copies of this card in the deck, you can increase the numbers of Clement's Undo that we run, and also increase the number of the next card, which we're also running at 2 to 3 for that preference, being the Predaplant Saranciant. When an opponent's monster declares a direct attack, you can special summon this card from your hand. After damage calculation, if this battled an opponent's monster, you can destroy that opponent's monster, and if this card is destroyed by battle, or if this card on the field is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can add 1 Predap card from your deck to your hand, except for Saranciant. So the fact that it says Predap means that you can also add Predaplant monsters, but also cards like Predapractice, and also our Predaponics, and other ones like our Predaprime Fusion, having all of these search targets in the form of this 1 level 1 monster. And like I said before, with cards like our Volacula, being able to have a scale 0 means that we can pendulum summon out these level 1 monsters onto the field, also to be used for Starving Dead and Fusion Dragons fusion plays. And then for the last of the 1-ofs for the Predaplant monsters, the 1 copy of Drosophilum Hydra Predaplant. You can special summon this card from your hand or graveyard by tributing 1 monster on either field with a predator counter. You can only special summon this card once per turn this way, and during the player's turn, if this card is on the field or in the graveyard, you can banish 1 other Predaplant monster from your graveyard to target a face-up monster on the field, and it loses 500 attack. Just having a monster in the main deck to tribute out an opponent's monster is why I like running 1 copy of this deck, because you can set up that predator counter and then just take away that monster by special summoning out this card onto the field. The other monsters I run in the main deck are 3 copies of Lone Fire Blossom, just for the fact that this card can grab any of the plant monsters in the deck. If you summon out cards like Orpheus Scorpio, you'll get that additional search with this card as well. If you go for the added play, depending on which one you summon out, like your Spider Orchid, you have all of these optional benefits with these cards that you summon onto the field, but most of the time I will go for the Orpheus Scorpio to have the special summon play, and setting up other Predaplants that we may discard off to the graveyard also. With the last of the main deck monsters just being 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joy Spring for more hand trap shutdown of any of our opponent's searches or sends to the graveyard they may try to do. And then for the spells, I run 3 copies of Predapractice. You special summon 1 Predaplant monster from your hand, then add 1 Predap card from your deck to your hand, except for Predapractice. Also, for the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck, except for fusion monsters. You can only activate 1 Predapractice per turn, but the majority of our extra deck are fusion monsters, so it's really not any restriction there with what we can summon out with this card. And just having a special summon of a Predaplant monster, and then also a search means we have an additional ad for any of the other cards that we run, including the 2 copies of Predaprime Fusion. If a Predaplant monster or monsters is on the field, fusion summon 1 dark fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from either field as material, including 2 or more dark monsters you control. You can only activate 1 Predaprime Fusion per turn, so being able to use an opponent's resource almost makes this a smaller super polymerization. I'm not running super poly in the deck, I just don't know what's going to happen with it on the ban list. If you wanted to run it, you can reduce some of the other numbers for the spells that we run to include more copies of it. You may even want to reduce Predaprime Fusion to 1 and add in other copies of that card. But still, being a quick play spell gives you the option for having a Predaplant monster on the field, using an opponent's monster as that resource as well, since some of our cards require, 3 dark monsters on the field. So if your opponent has that 1 with the Predator counter and you have 2 other Predaplant monsters on the field, you can just take away that monster using this spell also. Also 2 copies of Predaplant, another spot if you wanted to add Super Poly in along with taking down the Predaplant Fusion, and 1 copy of this spell. Once per turn, you can special summon 1 level 4 lower Predaplant monster from your hand or graveyard, but it has its effects negated, even if this card leaves the field. And once during your standby phase, pay 100 life points or destroy this card. So just having a small premature burial-like card on the field helps for just keeping your resources on the field to use for all your Predaplant monsters. And also for the one-ofs, for the Preda cards, 1 copy of Preda Pruning, another special summon option from the graveyard, along with the 1 Predablast for more options for revealing Preda cards in your hand to target that main number of cards on the field and place Predator counters on them to set up with some of the other cards we're already running in the deck, like our Predaplant Fusion and our Clemansandu also. And then for the additional fusion cards, the 1 copy of Polymerization. Only run 1 copy of this card because we do have the Pendulum Scale set up along with just Search Power to add this card to our hand for the fusion play, just being able to special summon 1 Predaplant monster. So once we have the option for Darling Tanya Cobra's special summon, you can add the Polymerization or any other fusion card as well. So additionally, we're running the 1 Greater Polymerization for the added search, the 1 Ultra Polymerization to get resources back on the field to use for more fusion plays, the 1 instant fusion, and to finish off the rest of the main deck, the 1 copy of Call by the Grave for more graveyard shutdown of any of our opponent's cards. Not running any traps. I find them to be too slow for with the actual Predaplant playstyle meant to do for the deck. But for the fusion monsters, I run the 1 copy of Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, one of our go-to boss monsters in the deck. If it's fusion summon, you can make this card gain attack equal to 1 special summon monster your opponent controls till the end of this turn, and once per turn you can target a level 5 or higher monster your opponent controls. Until the end of this turn, this card's name becomes that monster's original name, and replace this card's effect with that monster's original effects. And if this fusion summoned card is destroyed, you can destroy all special summon monsters your opponent controls, being a sort of faster like Mirror Shade, being also able to copy the Mirror Jade's effect on the field for the banish option, but then just being able to destroy all special summon monsters right when this card is destroyed also. Also, the 1 copy of Greedy Venom Fusion Dragon and the 1 copy of the Starving Venom Predapower Fusion Dragon for the additional fusion boss monsters that we can summon out onto the field, with the needed requirements being 1 Dark Fusion monster and a Fusion monster for Predapower, needing more of a heavy investment to summon out this card, but also being a stronger boss monster at that, and then needing the requirements of a Starving Venom Fusion Dragon and a Predaplant monster to summon out Greedy Venom Fusion Dragon, having a very similar playstyle for the reduction in Predator counter on the field, and also for the fact that Predapower is always treated as a Predaplant card, also to be able to get those searches. I also run the 2 copies of Predaplant Dragostapelia for the added search power of being able to stop an opponent's card effect, placing a Predator counter on the field as well with that card, and negating the activated effects of an opponent's monster that has the Predator counter to begin with. And 2 copies of Predaplant Embelio Melodies. Now, I like this card. It's the instant fusion target that I run in the deck also, so then we have the other fusion requirement needed for one of the 2 cards for Starving Venom, Predaplant, or Predapower Fusion Dragon. And if this card is fusion summoned, you can add 1 Predaplant monster or Predap spell or trap from your deck or graveyard or face up in the extra deck to your hand. So just activating instant fusion, summoning out this card immediately also gives you that search to use also. And then for the rest of the fusion monsters, 1 copy of Predaplant Trivolveritum, 1 copy of Chimera Rafflesia, and the 1 Guardian Chimera, because we do run the Polymerization and plenty of monsters with different names to fusion to summon out this boss monster on the field, while having more of the setup with all of our other different Predaplant cards we run, including the different targets to use our opponent's monsters to summon out cards like Trivolveritum. And for the Link monsters, the 1 copy of Dark the Dark Charmer Gloomy, the 1 Nightmare Phoenix, the 1 IP Masquerena, 1 Nightmare Unicorn, and the 1 Yugioh. You don't go into Link summons as much as you do fusion summons in the deck, but I still like to have them as added backups also. And then as for some of the go-to plays in the deck, if you just have a pretty good search and setup for some of your Predaplant cards, depending on if you go first or second, that will also determine the setup you want to do. So just having these 3 cards in your hand, you can go for the initial setup using your Bafulakula and your Triantis, and this play works best if you went second against your opponent. If they have an extra deck monster, all the better. But with this play, you'll go for this setup, and then you'll go for the scale setup as well with your 2 monsters. monsters being able to then fusion summon out using your Bifulacula's effect, and Triantis being able to use monsters in your Pendulum Zone, you will then summon out your needed monsters. You can summon out the Predaplant Yugioh Melodies, needing 2 Predaplant monsters. So then you can activate the effect of your Triantis to then add back the monster for the play, targeting the Bifulacula to add Triantis back to your hand. The Triantis will then place the Predator counter on the opponent's card also, so you have this card in your hand, this one face up in the extra deck, and then the Yugioh Melodies will be able to add 1 Predaplant monster or 1 Predap spell trap from your deck or graveyard to your hand. So then with this card, you can use the Predaprime Fusion for the add off of that card, and then from there, for the special summon, you can normal summon out your Clement Sendu. So then you have the additional play. If your opponent has the 1 monster on the field, you can then use the Clement Sendu with that 1 Predator counter you set up already to then have the play for that monster, because with the Yugioh Melodies, you also set another one on the opponent's monster, but if they only have 1 monster, you already put the Predaplant counter with the Triantis. If they had a second monster, you can use the Yugioh Melodies to put on that second one. You can then use the Clement Sendu with that 1 monster with the Predator counter to go for another fusion play into your monster of choice, since you have the Predator counter on that monster as well. Do not forget the setup, and they have that monster on the field also. You can then use the monster for your fusion play to go into the fusion summon for those monsters in the field. For the monster's fusion materials, you can fusion summon the Dark Fusion monster, all the better for the summon that you'll use, because then you can go for your Starving Venom Fusion Dragon if it was the Dark attribute monster. And then from there, you took their 1 monster, you can use the Predaprime Fusion for that additional monster using your 2 resources on the field to then have that additional monster that your opponent has to go into your own Predaplant Triple Veritum, using both of the Predator monsters on the field for the Predator counters as well for that setup, taking away 2 of your opponent's monsters, leaving you with a big boss monster also to deal with from your opponent as well. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed. Like I said, I always like to update this deck. The 4-dimension counterparts from the Arc 5 series were some of my favorite decks. Always love updating Speedroids, Phantom Knights, Odd Eyes, Performer Pals, and Predaplants alike with all the different support they have. And as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.